From Washington to Moscow, from New York to Paris, from Rome to Jerusalem, around the world, the prophecies of the Bible are being fulfilled. J.R. Church, author and lecturer, is standing by with today's analysis of Bible prophecy. History has reached an impasse. The world is soon to see the return of Jesus Christ. And now, here is J.R. Church with today's Prophecy in the News.
In 1917, in a cafe in Geneva, Switzerland, an intensely ambitious and fanatical man sat writing furiously. He had written there for many years, in exile from his native land of Russia, living in the expectation of the great day of revolution, when he would be called to the center of the world stage. He was the leader of a small group of Marxist revolutionaries called Bolsheviks. He had, scattered throughout Russia and the prisons of the world, 40,000 followers, devoted to their leader, equally fanatical, and unreservedly dedicated to the ideas of revolution and world conquest. His name was Lenin. Suddenly, in February of 1917, news burst upon the world of a great Russian upheaval. The Tsar was dethroned. A parliament was established to guide the steps of a newborn republic, and the social revolutionary leader Kerensky was called to the helm. Lenin and his scattered followers hastened to the new center of revolution, Petrograd. The city has since been renamed Leningrad. Stalin returned from Siberian exile, and Trotsky came from a Canadian concentration camp, and Lenin traveled by armored train across embattled Germany to his native land, leaving Geneva, the city of his exile. On arrival, Lenin announced to the other non-Bolshevik revolutionaries that he alone, supported by his Bolshevik fragment, would conquer and rule the vast territories of Russia. Zealously, scientifically, and ruthlessly, he set about to make his prediction come true. In April, he renamed the Bolshevik section of the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party the Communist Party of Russia. In October, the Communists organized a second revolution, overwhelmed the new infant republic, and Lenin became dictator of all Russia. An expansive program of conquest was then initiated, which has been successful beyond the wildest dreams of avarice. History records no movement growing, conquering, consolidating, and expanding as communism has unceasingly done since that time. These statistics are startling, even terrifying. In 1917, they had a mere 40,000 followers. By 1958, they were in absolute control of almost 1 billion people. Within that first 40 years, they had multiplied those under their control by 20,000, an increase of 2 million%. By 1978, 20 years later, they had doubled that, by the continuing military conquest of small developing nations throughout the world. Many of the countries of Indochina have fallen to the communists in recent years. Other countries in the Middle East are fast falling under their force. The countries of Africa are being conquered by communism, and the countries of Central and South America are plagued with unrest in the wake of communism's aggressive advance. How has this tremendous success been accomplished? What tremendous dynamic of power is concealed within the categories of communism that has driven it forward at an irresistible rate, as a whirlwind? How has it managed to captivate the mind and imagination of young and old? Why has it been able to immobilize the intelligence, the loyalty, the capacity to sacrifice of those so captivated, discipline them, and transform them into a mold of a communist cadre, and then send them forth limitless in enthusiasm, confident of victory, careless of personal death, to lay waste and conquer the earth? What is communism? Well, communism is a religion of promise. It has advanced across the world on the wings of a promise. The promise is twofold in nature. One aspect of the communist promise is very well known, but the other is almost unknown. One aspect appeals to the poor, the ignorant, and the underprivileged. The other aspect appeals to the wealthy, the intellectually superior, the idealistic reformers. To the poor of the world, the servants of communism go with this message: follow me, and I will build a new world for you and your children, a world from which hunger and cold have been forever banished, a world in which war and pestilence are mere historic memories, a world without exploitation of man by man, a world without racial animosity and discrimination, a world of peace and plenty, a world of culture and intellect, a world of brotherhood, liberty, and justice. Can you imagine the appeal of this promise to those millions living in the narrow no-man's land between malnutrition and starvation, never having had the comfortable sensation of retiring to a bed after a full and satisfying meal, and the knowledge that at least food and raiment for the days ahead are assured? Can you imagine the appeal of this promise to the millions who watch their children die in birth or during their first years, the victims of filth, starvation, and preventable disease carried by flies and mosquitoes? The force of this appeal is multiplied when the messenger is obviously sincere and is willing to leave his own home and the land of his birth, to forsake his family and loved ones, to carry this message to these unfortunate poor. Identifying himself with their woes, he lives like them, eats their food, and daily risks his life to bring the message he bears to more and more who stand in dire need. Surely it does not require any great faculty of imagination to understand the tremendous appeal such a program must have in those dark lands of ignorance, illiteracy, hunger, and disease, the lands of the East. That aspect of the communist promise is widely known and easily understood. There is a second portion of the promise that is used, not to captivate the poor, but to seduce the rich, not to enlighten the ignorant, but to enlist the educated, not to bribe the cynical, but to ensnare the idealistic. Not only is there a new society to be created, but there is also to emerge a new and finer mankind. Human nature itself is to be transformed into something infinitely finer and more beautiful. Mankind is to be redeemed from vice, from depravity, and sin in all its forms. Bible-believing Christians, above all others, should be able to understand the appeal of such a promise, for we are dedicated to the redemption of man through the gospel of the grace of God revealed in Jesus Christ. And we rejoice when a wayward sinner finds his way in repentance and faith to the foot of the cross of Calvary and rises a new man in Christ Jesus. Communism, then, offers a similar promise, but communism is not a program to cure one or two, but to cure all of the sins of the whole world. Its plan is not to reform one drunkard, but to eliminate all drunkenness, all crime, all vice, and everything that spoils and mars what man should be. Surely, the appeal of such a vision can be well understood. That is why the educated and the wealthy are sucked in by this communist promise. The creation of a new and redeemed mankind, what a nobler vision could any have? Well, to promise is one thing, to fulfill is another. Obviously, there can be no perfect society as long as man continues with his present sinful human nature. Man must be redeemed from within before society as a whole can be redeemed. But communism promises to bring forth a new social order. However, they say, it must emerge from the ashes of the destroyed capitalistic civilization. The answer of all of our problems, say the communists, lies in the one word, science. Communism, then, is a scientific approach to the problems of our world. The wealthy, the intellectual, can understand that terminology, for we have seen in the last century history's greatest advances in the realm of technology and scientific discovery. Communism, then, acquires great prestige among the intellectuals by reason of its claim to be scientific. Scientific Marxism begins with three basic hypotheses to serve as the foundation for this scientific program. These foundations of communism are atheism, materialism, and economic determinism. Atheism means there is no God. Karl Marx was an atheist before he was a communist. Atheism was his first and last intellectual love. His earliest writings were attempts to prove that the German philosopher Hegel was an atheist. From the fiber and texture of his atheism, he built his philosophy and program of communism. His greatest disciple, Lenin, once wrote in a pamphlet on religion, and he began it with these words: "Atheism is a fundamental portion of Marxism, and Marxism is the theory in practice of scientific socialism." Communism without atheism is like cancer without malignancy. It is a contradiction of terms. When communism rejects God, it rejects all the supernatural moral law, all absolute criteria of truth and error. It abolishes heaven and hell and all absolute values associated with human life. Man is left in the battlefield where the laws are his own to make or break, where all the codes of ethics and morality are relative, discretionary, and subject to change. The next hypothesis of communism is called materialism. Having disposed of the question of God, communism then considers the nature of man, and here they are equally specific. Man is a matter in motion and nothing more. The entire universe of which man is a part is entirely material, they say. Quality is a thought process, just a quality of matter. Matter thinks. The brain secretes thoughts as the liver secretes bile. The total life of mankind, thoughts, emotions, sentiments, culture, and religion, are simply the product of the motion of his material constituents. Man is an animal and nothing more. He is the product of evolution. Though he is the most intelligent of all animals, yet he is still an animal. He has no spirit, nor yet any soul. And since there is no God, man obviously cannot have been made in the image of that which does not exist. There is therefore no special value associated with every individual life. Each human is an animal, and therefore the human race can be scientifically improved by using the methods and techniques of animal husbandry. Scientific materialism wants to breed a new superhuman race. No chance to choose your own mate, and if your offspring is not physically and intellectually perfect, they must be eliminated. No regard for feeling or human emotion. It's all scientific materialism. The third hypothesis for communist scientific Marxism is economic determinism. The human individual possesses certain characteristics of social and individual life, certain patterns of thought and emotion. How is the personality and character of each individual derived? What determines what each animal shall think? What emotions shall accompany such thoughts? What shall be the pattern of moral, social, and religious behavior that emerges? It is at this point that Marx makes his greatest contribution to human thought, so we are told. In simple language, here it is: the entire personality, including thoughts, emotions, religious experiences, family attitudes, sentiments, and talents, is derived from the economic situation, from the environment of our economy. We are the captive creations of our capitalistic system. It has ordained what we shall think, how we shall feel, and what we shall do in any given situation. The Communist Manifesto makes this very plain. It specifically states that the family, as we know it, the hallowed relationship of parent and child, is derived from the capitalistic economic system, and that parental love will vanish with the vanishing of capitalism. It goes further and specifically states that the concepts of freedom and justice are derivatives of the class struggle, and that when class struggle ceases, the concepts will disappear. No one is individually responsible for his character or thoughts. As his class or social origin has determined, so he thinks, feels, and acts. To change the character and personality, What is needed is a basic change in the economic system. This, of course, must be accomplished by a violent revolution. The communists have always been perfectly frank on this subject, beginning with the Communist Manifesto, which says, "We openly declare that our ends can be obtained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions." They categorically reject any suggestion that the transition from capitalism to socialism can be by the peaceful pathway of reform. Scientific law has been written that the changeover must be both revolutionary and violent. The key to the program of the communism's conquest is the word infiltration. Infiltration of government, of churches, of sporting bodies, of social clubs, infiltration of institutions of any and every kind, and above all, infiltration of industrial labor unions. All of these organizations are to be so scientifically manipulated as to bring to pass a violent revolution. The old-fashioned Marxists believed that capitalism was the root cause of all human sin. Destroy the capitalistic system and thus destroy sin. They believed that after the revolution, they would be able to introduce a form of society in which men would be free and in which they would receive enough for every need. But into this honeymoon of optimism there came the grim voice of the scientific realist Lenin. In effect, he said, "My dear friends, you have forgotten something very important. You are really a crowd of idealistic utopian dreamers. Certainly, all human frailty, ignorance, and avarice are derived from the capitalistic system. That," he said, "is obvious. But you say that all we have to do is to remove sin is to destroy capitalistic system? You try to go too quickly. When we have destroyed the root of all evil, the fruit remains in the characters of the many millions of earth who are diseased and deformed. It is true that the disease condition will vary in the different countries, but nevertheless mankind in general remains ignorant, illiterate, indolent, avaricious, class-conscious, patriotic, and religious. Before the true communist society can be created, these diseased characteristics, a hangover from capitalism, must be eliminated. To do this, an intellectually applied scientific program based on the established principles of animal husbandry must be implemented. To do this, it is necessary to have a strong and intelligent power to carry out the program. Therefore, he said, we must establish an absolute dictatorship. Under communism, then, the principles of animal husbandry are implemented. The husbandman, the Communist Party, has transferred his herds from the diseased environment of capitalism to the disease-free environment of socialism. Unfortunately, the animals bring with them the disease contracted in their old environment. The dominant motive of the husbandman is to breed a new stock entirely free from this disease. This cannot be done in a day. Obviously, he will have to concentrate on the new generation for his finished product and utilize his present stock in the best possible manner to accomplish the necessary work of the new environment without permitting them to transmit that disease to the young. Now, some people will be more infected by the disease of capitalism than others, depending upon their class of society. Obviously, these animals must be eliminated for the well-being of the whole program. There is absolutely no element of reprisal or punishment in this liquidation. It is simply a necessary scientific procedure. The husbandman may presumably be very fond of certain diseased animals, but sentiment has no place in a scientific program. The animal must go. This is entirely logical within the framework of the communist beliefs. Remember, there is no God. Man is pure animal. There is no question of soul or spirit, heaven or hell, to be considered. It is simply scientific human betterment on a mass scale. That is why, since 1917 in the Soviet Union, nearly 70 million people have been slaughtered by the bloody communists. That is why in Red China, 64 million people have been put to death since communism came to power. That is why in Cambodia, from April 1975 to April 1978, 2.5 million people were executed. That is why in Cuba and other communist-dominated countries, some 3.5 million precious people have been put to death by the brutal butchers of communism. In fact, 145 million people around this world have been killed by communists in this generation. Thus, the mass murder program of communism is a logical consequence of their basic beliefs. It is science in action. The murders of millions cannot be attributed to Russian imperialism or to Asiatic cruelty. It is simply scientific communism in action. When communism takes over a country, the first people to be liquidated are the religious, for their minds have been diseased. It is not that they don't like Christians. It is simply that Christians will be a deterrent to the overall success of the program. Should the communist menace conquer this country, it may comfort you to know that the hand that condemns you and your family to death is driven not by malicious, vindictive hatred, but by scientific necessity. Not all of the people diseased with capitalism are immediately liquidated by bullet or bayonet. Others go but a slower pathway of overwork and starvation. Let us return to our animal husbandry analogy. The herd has been transferred to the new environment of socialism. In this environment, a great deal of work cries out to be done. It is therefore reasonable to select diseased human animals in whom the disease is not overwhelmingly contagious, segregate them, and put them to work until they die. They are not allowed to breed, for they would contaminate the future race, but they can be useful. They are put into slave labor camps under conditions of overcrowding, malnutrition, and frequent death. Nevertheless, much work useful to socialism is accomplished. Canals and railways are built, salt, coal, uranium, gold are mined, and lumber is felled for export. In these conditions of labor, the average time to die takes approximately 3 years, and much work is accomplished in that time. Now, this is what the labor camps are in practice, but in theory they are something quite different. They are personality hospitals in which the disease due to capitalism can be cured. They even provide these personality hospitals free. What generous people they are. Which would you prefer, immediate liquidation or re-education in a labor camp? The alternative may soon emerge as the coming Antichrist sets about to establish his one-world government. While the labor camps specialize in hospitalization, the less fortunate are not being overlooked. Re-education is provided for them by a new attitude toward labor. The slogan is, "From every man according to his ability, to every man according to his work." The unions become instruments of a dictatorship for the speed up of work and a means of discipline over the workers. Strikes are forbidden, and any incitement to strike is a capital offense. Every factory has its own jails. Late arrival to work is sabotage, and absenteeism is treason. Under these ideal working conditions, a new attitude toward labor develops. A new character emerges. The new socialist man is on the way. This is the dream, the vision that lures man to the communist hook, the goal at the end of the rainbow. The communists have achieved portions of it, the violent and destructive revolution, the mass exterminations, and the vile labor camps. In 1917, the Central Committee in Communist Russia consisted of 31 members and alternates. The leader, Lenin, attributed the entire success of the revolution to the sterling characters, undying devotion, and invincible selflessness of this group. Every one of them had suffered much for the cause, in prison and out of prison, in exile and out of exile. Through it all, they had remained loyal, devoted, and invincible. At long last, the golden day of their dreams came to pass, and socialism covered 1/6 of the surface of the earth. Freed from the vicious influence of the capitalistic system, what wonderful people they must have become. Let the communists tell us what happened to them. The Central Committee degenerated into such swine, such treacherous wild beasts, such hyenas, using communist terminology, that everyone had to be put to death. When Lenin died in 1924, the Politburo, the highest body of world communism, had 7 members: Zinoviev, Kamenev, Stalin, Bukharin, Trotsky, Rykov, and Tomsky. Stalin alone survived. All of the others degenerated and had to be destroyed. The perfection of character is thus revealed as a delusion. The chain of events breaks down. The golden future fades, and we are left with the intolerable nightmare of a dreadful present. The dictatorship, the extermination program, the labor camp. Horror piled upon horror, a veritable living hell. Farewell perfection. The beast is here, and here he remains.